This is going to be exactly the same as a talk I gave a few weeks ago, so if you've heard this already, come find me in the break and I'll tell you a knock-knock joke or something. So when Arthur City first asked me to speak at one of these events, my first reaction was, "Are you sure? Me?" He seemed pretty certain, so here we go. And this is going to be a bit of a ramble, and maybe too many ideas all at once. Please bear with me. So I'm a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I'm a hobby anthropologist. I find a lot of joy in studying cultures, making comparisons, and using those comparisons to mock my friends. With that in mind, in this talk I hope to briefly recount my experiences with religion and existentialism to derive a very frustrating answer to the question of what Mitrahood means to me. So I was raised in a dual religious household with a Catholic mother and a Jewish father. I distinctly remember as a child sitting in church singing a hymn to Mary, Mother of Jesus. Of all mothers sweetest, none with thee compare. And like a thunderbolt, I remember thinking, who made that call? Who was qualified to make that call? My mom's pretty incredible. What is she, chopped liver? This, combined with the hypocrisy of many Catholics in my life, to alienate me from that particular belief system. So for these and other reasons, I spent a lot of time not believing in anything in particular. I grew up in an age of internet trendy atheism where religion was an easy punching bag to mark one as an intellectual. Religion at best seemed like a cheap answer to expensive questions. When pressed, I marketed myself as a Pastafarian, an adherent of the flying spaghetti monster for those who remember, but otherwise delighted in ambiguity. When asked about death, I'd flippantly quip, by the time I'm old, we're all gonna be immortal anyways. My life was fine, opportunities floated my way, and whatever baggage I carried could be numbed in a myriad of intoxicants. And whatever misery came my way just felt like the way things were supposed to be. And this both intellectual and literal adolescence carried on until years later, stoned out of our minds, a friend remarked, "How do you feel about all the future versions of us looking back on this moment?" And with that, the solipsism of the present broke. I experienced the current moment as a cascading tunnel of perception, tracing out backwards and forwards in time. I saw a long free fall to annihilation, and I also experienced food poisoning, spending the next few hours throwing up undercooked chili as my friend patiently rubbed my back. Recovering from that, I had seen death in its face. I saw grains of sand pouring through the hourglass. I had nightmares of the soul spiraling out from the body into a cruel afterlife of hungry angels. I was ungrounded, adrift, and cognizant of the fact there were no simple answers. Two schools of thought pulled me back to earth from the void. The first of these was the writing of Kurt Vonnegut. Without going into needless detail, he's a sci-fi writer whose stories poke holes in human subjectivity and invite the reader to consider the universe outside of their immediate experience of it. He writes with tremendous empathy for how confusing it is to be alive, which comforted me immeasurably, and pokes fun at anybody who thinks they have all the answers. The second school of thought was, surprise, surprise, Buddhism. I'd been passively exposed to Buddhist iconography traveling in Asia as a child, and had attended several meditation classes. But when looking for the answers to the meaning of the life, Buddhism provides a hard pill to swallow. Existence is suffering. We suffer because we misunderstand our nature. We can overcome this misunderstanding by following the Noble Eightfold Path. This is not a simple thing to grapple with. It is blunt, nuanced, and painful. But it sells you nothing. There is no divine reward, no higher power, no condemnation, no lotion, no potion. Just the hard work of learning to see beyond ourselves into infinity. Whatever else has happened since then, my path to Buddhism grew from that seed. From looking into the void and learning to see beauty. And though at first Buddhism just seemed to be a good way to live, or a code of ethics to live a harmonious life, over time, something transcended started to come through. Not grace from above, not judgment from below, but the chance to see beyond the obvious. To be able to lift mountains not just with the mind, but with the heart, and to be able to alternate understanding a linear experience of the world with the erratic and beautiful chaos underlying it. Triratna, as a specific Buddhist tradition, appeals to me due to its self-aware and open-minded approach to the fundamentals of Buddhism. It's a Tibetan spin on an Indian religion interpreted by a well-read British man. On one hand, this results in a tradition somewhat isolated from its cultural roots, but on the other hand, the tradition results that's more conscious of the good and the bad of its baggage. Triratna operates with consideration of those unwilling to drop their entire life to become monks, circumvents some of the uncomfortable gender dynamics in traditional Buddhism, Buddhism and continually attempts to modernize its ethical and moral stance while maintaining an awareness of the higher consciousness behind its traditions. It has been a tremendous joy to me to find how many different flavors of counterculture are represented in Triratna attendees. Labor activists, members of the LGBTQ+ community, academics, dreamers, idealists, and quite a few goofballs. I think it further speaks to Triratna's integrity that most of its adherents found it as adults, without being raised to grow into it specifically. Triratna, though imperfect, in a lot of ways stewards the fundamentals of Buddhism to make them suited to the modern world without losing their essence. This level of considered nuance makes me quite confident committing to practice here for the time being. People in my Mitra study group frequently joke that I talk about movies too much. And I absolutely agree, but I'm going to make a reference here anyways because I feel like it. So in the film No Country for Old Men, Anton Chigurh, as played by Javier Bardem, quips, "If the rule you followed led you to this, of what use was the rule?" To that, I would retort, even if the rule you followed led you to this, there was still probably no other outcome. As children, we learn that our subjectivity is our identity. Our unique experiences of the world are all that we will be, something finite to be eventually extinguished. In practicing Buddhism, we learn to consider this idea of the self more flexibly. In healthy practice, we balance our idea of the self with the reality of the self, gaining a complex and frequently contradictory relationship to reality on all its levels. We aspire to see beyond appearances to the heart of things, both in ourselves and in the world. We try to see beyond any single achievement or outcome to the vast continuing potential of all things. On the day of my Mitra ceremony, people asked me if I was nervous, but the question genuinely confused me. The ceremony was beautiful, the community was lovely, and it is both an honor and privilege to be accepted into this tradition as a serious practitioner. But Mitrahood was a passing monument on the motorway. Not a fundamental change to my identity, just one more proof that the right choices are being made. Not merely conceiving of the path, but walking it too. To conclude, I'm a Mitra because if I wasn't a Mitra, I wouldn't have ended up being a Mitra. But I am a Mitra because I'm the kind of person who ended up being a Mitra, and I'm a Mitra here because the company is pleasant and the conversations are thoughtful. I hope that's enough to work with, and if that sounded a little circular and frustrating, congratulations, you now know that headache for the rest of your Buddhist practice. Thank you very much.